Every morning I wake up, I eat an apple, which gets me fueled and ready to do some work. But the reason why I actually eat it is because it makes me happy and it looks yummy and just easy to eat. However, there are actually many benefits to an apple. Now, I'm not going to go through the benefits because you got the whole internet for that, but I'll tell you why it makes me stay awake. Well, if we look at it at a molecular level, we will see these small molecules combine together. Now, what do these molecules make up? Well, these are called carbohydrates, which is a macromolecule. Now, this molecule over here is the basic or the most common structure of a carbohydrate, and it's called the glucose molecule. I know you've heard this. Many people just call this sugar, but this is actually a simple sugar, which means it can combine to form more complex sugars. These simple sugars are also known as monosaccharides. Monosaccharides usually look like pentose or hexose rings. Pentose is 5 carbon sugars, so for example, DNA, or more common, hexose are 6 carbon sugars, such as glucose, sucrose, galactose, and fructose. And guess what? Fructose is in apples. So, sugars in general is a short-term energy source, which are the main source of energy, which is why an apple a day keeps the doctor away, because it keeps my body running for a while. Now, I'll discuss how carbs are effective energy molecules later on during the presentation. So notice the name carbohydrates. Well, we can break this up and we see that carbo is carbon and hydrate is water. That is carbon plus water, which is called hydrated carbon. From the name itself, we can figure out its empirical formula, that is CH2, and we'll put an N depending on how many sugars are combined. So we can say it has a ratio of 1C, 2H, and 1O. So to make long things short, this is the basic formula for carbohydrates. Whoa! All these N's and C's and O's and H's? Well, basically this is the amount of sugars. This is the glucose molecule, and finally H2O is water. So if we have 2 sugars, we replace that with N and do the math. For example, what is the molecular formula for a polymer made by linking 5 glucose molecules together by dehydration reactions? In this case, our N is equal to 5. Recall that formula, we just plug N into that formula and do the math. If we subtract the H8O4, this will yield this answer. Now remember nomenclature where we combine 2 different elements such as carbon and oxygen and called it carbon monoxide? Mono because of nomenclature rules. Well, these rules also somewhat applies when we add glucose. So if there's 2 glucose molecules, what would that be? You guessed right, it would be disaccharides. And instead of saying tri or tetrasaccharides, we just say if there's 3 or more glucoses, then we'd call these polysaccharides. Now mainly there are 3 groups of carbohydrates, which are monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Let's go more into these. Monosaccharide is a simple sugar and most commonly glucose. There are 2 types of glucose molecules. There's the alpha glucose and then there is the beta glucose. Notice that there's only one difference between alpha and beta glucose molecules. Alpha here has the hydroxide molecule on the opposite plane of the hydroxymethyl molecule, and beta glucose has the hydroxide molecule on the same plane as the hydroxymethyl molecule. Alpha glucoses are used for energy storage. It's usually a simple helix shaped like so. Beta glucose molecules are for structure. The links between these will be explained later on. But this is how beta glucoses would stack up on top of each other. Now let's talk about disaccharides, which are 2 sugars. So, 2 glucoses, a glucose plus a glucose will yield a maltose. A glucose plus galactose will give us a lactose, and a glucose plus fructose will give sucrose, which are also found in apples. Finally, polysaccharides, which are many sugars. Alright, so there's 4 types of polysaccharides. There's cellulose, starch, glycogen, and chitin. Let's start with the first one. Cellulose. It makes up the cell walls of a plant. So this will be made up of beta glucose chains because remember, beta glucose is for structure and it has a 1 to 4 beta link. I'll explain later what that is. Further, cellulose is really strong, so it's hard to break them down, and that's why they're indigestible. So for example, fiber, it is made up of cellulose, and apples contain fiber. So when I eat that apple, I don't really digest. The fiber in the apple passes through my digestive system, taking what it can along with it. Basically pulls everything down and then it comes out of my body through, you know where. Now let's move on. Starch. It is used for energy storage in plants. And in fact, plants make carbohydrates through photosynthesis and store them as starch. Since these are for energy storage, they're made up of alpha glucoses, and these have a simple helix shaped like so. These have a 1 to 4 alpha link, and thus they are unbranched. Again, I'll explain the 1 to 4 links later, so don't worry about that. Now the third main sugar, glycogen, is used for energy storage in animals. Again, these are made up of alpha glucose molecules. These are mostly found in liver and also in muscle cells. Additionally, these are highly branched and have a 1 to 4 alpha link. Finally, chitin, which can be found in exoskeletons of insects, and these are very structural, as we can see in this beetle. Thus, these are made up of beta glucose molecules, so it has a 1 to 4 beta link. Now what about this 1 to 4 beta link thingy? What the hell? What is this? Well, glucose exists in two forms, as a straight chain and as alpha or beta rings, like so. These numbers are on the carbon atoms, so when I say a 1 to 4 link, it means I'm linking the 1 carbon to the 4 carbon. But how do we know which one is 1 and which one is 4? Or in other words, how do we number them? Well, we have to first find the aldehyde group in the molecule, which is a carbon stuck to one oxygen, one hydrogen, and a variable group, like so. So in the straight chain form, this is the aldehyde group, since it has one carbon connected to oxygen and hydrogen and the rest of this, which is R. We start from there. Remember, we only number carbons only, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Boom. Now, how do we get from straight chain form to ring form? Well, we will connect this one to the 5 carbons hydroxide molecule. This is how it would turn out. Notice it's connected to the hydroxide molecule and the numbering stays as follows. But what if we were just given the ring form? The same process. Look for the aldehyde group right here and count the carbons. And we counted as so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So remember how I said 1 to 4 alpha or beta links? Well, let's take starch for example. This is how you would draw it. Notice how the 1 is connected to the 4. Also, what link would this be? It will be an alpha link. That's because the hydroxide molecule is in the opposite plane of the hydroxymethyl molecule.